best salespeople, they have this like sort of like inner sort of like edge. You were talking about that dog in them, like, um, that sort of thing that drives professional athletes the same way to become Olympians.
Getting into Glencoco, let's say if people are not familiar with you or not familiar with the people that don't know about Glencoco, I have my own understanding of it, but can you just break it down as far as what Glencoco is to start us off with?
Yeah, of course. So after about 3 years working for different tech companies, so after I left Morgan Stanley, I went to Ricotta and then I went to Wiz, and these are software and technology companies that sell to businesses, and every business needs sales reps. Um, and within sales, there's lots of different like job functions, right? Tech sales is just two words, the word tech and the word sales. But tech is a huge category and sales is also a huge category. So within the sales
Exactly.
role, there's lots of different types of roles in sales. So the first type of role is um, what you call sort of like a hunter. So a hunter is like a sales development rep or business development rep. And typically, because it's a tougher job and you're doing a lot of hunting and sort of like trying to find new business, a lot of cold calling, a lot of emailing. Typically, it's considered sort of a more sort of like entry level position. And basically, if you can kind of prove it out and prove that you're successful as a hunter, then you get to be sort of like a farmer. And a farmer is someone who basically the hunters will bring these leads, potential customers, and then account executives tend to be what are called closers. So closers will take these like potential customers that have interest and actually close deals. And so oftentimes the sales development rep job is a stepping stone to becoming an account executive. Being an account executive will typically pay a little bit better, but it's also a little bit more. There's a lot more complexity involved. You have to learn how to navigate deal cycles. Um, talk to multiple stakeholders at a company, be organized, be a sort of like project manager or consultant in some ways for the company as they're going about finding new business. But when I was at Ricotta and Wiz, we used to hire, big teams of SDRs and BDRs, sales development reps and BDRs. This is what Glencoco does. Um, um, and one of the challenges that um, we found at Ricotta and Wiz is, do you know the average tenure of a sales development rep or business development rep at tech companies? If you were to
I'm
guess,
actually,
like how
I'm, I'm actually so glad you asked me that because somebody told me it was 14 months, and I think I seen something else that said like 7 to 10 months.
yeah, well, I'm sure you can slice and dice it different ways, but on average, the average tenure of a sales development rep or a business development rep is 6 to 9 months, which means that like if you think about that, that's kind of crazy. Like statistically, every 6 to 9 months, on average, you're going to be looking for a new job. Um, and the reason why is because sales development reps and business development reps um, are typically most companies will employ sales development reps and business development reps through this like up or out model. So you remember how I was talking about Morgan Stanley, kind of my summer internship, and how it's like Hunger Games. It's very, very much a performance based job. So if you can't put up meetings, if you can't generate pipeline, then they're quickly going to let you go. Or if you do a good job, they're going to quickly kind of promote you into different types of roles. Um, and and so when you think about a job function that's so high turnover and high churn, um, it causes a lot of issues. So for one thing, for companies are always having to spend time interviewing, recruiting, training, hiring SDRs and BDRs. And then every 6 to 9 months, they have to fire them and then do the same thing over and over and over again. So companies incur a lot of shadow costs and time, basically like having to spend resources on hiring, training, and then firing and then rehiring, SDRs and BDRs. For salespeople or people who are interested in being SDRs or BDRs, it's a tough job too, because you're always basically having to go through a bunch of interviews, like get rejected. It's a pretty The nice thing about being a sales development rep or a business development rep is you don't need technical skills. You don't need to be like an engineer. You just have to know how to talk to people and write emails and be able to do like account research and follow up, because the SDR's job is basically to schedule a bunch of meetings for companies and go find new customers. Now, we created Glencoco, and the easiest way to think about how Glencoco works is we're solving problems on both sides, for people and for SDRs who use Glencoco. So the way Glencoco works is it's sort of a fractional B2B sales marketplace. It's basically an Uber for fractional BDRs or SDRs. So basically, business to business companies can post what are called like bounties or payouts on our platform for how much they'd pay for someone generating a sales qualified meeting. And then contractors can sign up on our platform, go through online courses that we set up in our platform to learn about the company, how to pitch, talk tracks, cold call scripts. And then they can actually use our all-in-one dialing, emailing, list building platform to actually go and like source meetings for companies and get paid out in real time after companies meet with them. So it's kind of a two-sided marketplace where people who enjoy or are interested in sales development or the SDR job can basically go on Glencoco and actually get matched with real companies that are looking for meetings, and then get paid out for actually performing real sort of like SDR, BDR work.
I love it. I love it. And that's amazing. And the crazy part is, I didn't know that you get paid same day. This whole time I thought it was just like a regular job, like 2 weeks later. Same day payment makes it so much better, because a lot of jobs that are commission only, people are kind of closed off to it. Like, oh, I want commission only. But if you literally get paid right away, it's an amazing experience. And to be able to put Glencoco SDR on your LinkedIn and on your resume is huge, especially in a market that values work experience. So I want to take a quick step back in terms of how you were at Morgan Stanley. You said it was like Hunger Games, and then you were in like a operations role. How'd you go from that to like a head of sales, head of growth type of role?
Well, I ended up leaving Morgan Stanley to join a tech company because I was also kind of personally fascinated by what was happening with, I think a lot of really cool companies build some really exciting sort of products in the technology space. And so I kind of wanted to, shift away from a role in finance to actually sort of building things. The role that the company had in mind for me was a sales operations role when I first started out. So what is sales operations? The way to think about it is, I like to use a lot of like military analogies. So if you think about
I love
sales
how
reps,
you I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I love how you be using the references and the analogies like the Hunger Games and the Uber of I like that a lot. I feel like that's high level talking when you're using that. Look, I'm sorry to
yeah, yeah,
interrupt you. Though.
no problem, no problem. So the way to think about it is, if you're going out and fighting a war or a military campaign, you need soldiers, right? Foot soldiers, infantrymen, cavalry, tanks. So you can think about like SDRs and account executives as, foot soldiers or tank, people who are going out into the market and finding new customers and new business. But, just as in a military campaign or a war, you need like a central sort of like team of strategists who can basically be like, okay, well, this army unit needs to cross, to Europe, and so we need to provide ships for them to be able to easily like cross over from the US into Europe, for example. Sales operations is sort of like the analogy of that in a sales organization where, they're responsible for, figuring out what types of quotas to set for their reps. They're responsible for, okay, like this company is selling, security cameras to all kinds of businesses. So we need to figure out what sorts of job titles and contact lists that we need to give the sales reps so that they can go and like reach out to these folks to go and secure new business, right? So there's a lot of like data, list building, lead generation. So I spent 6 months I was one of the first people on the sales operations team. At the time that I joined, the team was around 2 people. Now it's like I've since left the company, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's 50 people on that entire team now, because it's grown. The company's grown from 150 people to 3,000 people. My first job was sort of building a lot of like lead lists for reps to send out emails to and make calls to, like figuring out like comp structure and quota plans, analyzing the relative performance of different sorts of campaigns across different sorts of segments and markets, like what types of industries are most interested in using our product, and kind of like figuring out strategy from there. And naturally, if you think about a lot of those kind of those functions that I described, they're pretty similar to growth and demand generation as well. Like in growth and demand generation, which is just another fancy word for like marketing, you have to understand who your customers are, what is the messaging you want to lead with, and things like that. And so I kind of, when I joined Ricotta, it had always been sort of my goal to eventually, have a go at starting my own sort of business. And so for me, my motivations when I was there wasn't necessarily to become like, a VP or sort of like a middle manager at the company and be there for a long time. It was just, hey, I want to spend as much time learning as much as possible across as many different sort of like industries and departments, or different kind of departments of the company as possible. And so after about 6 months kind of growing and scaling out the sales operations team, I kind of raised my hand and I was like, hey, I'd love to take on a new challenge at the company. And so I shifted over to the growth and demand generation team.
That was great. Now, so it's something they say, it's easy to say, but it's harder in theory. So, you started off as like the brains of the operation, and then into like a director of growth, head of growth type position, and then start your own company. So when it comes to getting promoted, let's say if somebody is currently in a position or trying to pivot, trying to get promoted, well, what do you feel like made you successful? And then what's your best advice you would give to somebody else that's trying to accomplish the same thing?
Yeah, I think there's really two components to um, being promoted. The first is, let me take a step back. There's actually three components. The first is, does the company actually need to fill the role for like a promotion, right? So certain companies may not have the role that you're looking for available for you. Um, um, and that could be for a lot of reasons, like the company's too small, or maybe they want someone with a certain type of background or experience that you're, no matter how much time you spend, you're just not going to be able to have and fit those criteria. So the first thing is like, does the company actually have a role that you potentially could, get promoted into? That's a little bit outside of your control, although the way you can kind of control for that is to go to a company that has the kind of role you want, basically, right? If your current company doesn't have it. The second vector I would say that's important is, are you a top performer? Are you someone who has demonstrated in your current role that you are able to successfully execute on your KPIs and your mandates that you've been given, right? Because companies are going to promote people who, you know, um, who are able to actually put up and put up results and that are valuable for the business. Um, and then the third component is, are you someone who is able to build really good, healthy relationships with key stakeholders, at your company? Um, are you someone that's generally either well liked or really effective at your job and respected? Typically, when you're promoted, you're given more responsibilities, either in the form of managing teams, or you just have more things that are mission critical for the business that you now own as a responsibility. And a big part of getting promoted is like the people at the top who are making those promotion decisions feeling comfortable with you being able to do that. And that comfortability oftentimes is going to be a function of your ability to effectively understand who the key stakeholders are who make that decision on the promotion, and building good relationships with them early on, like letting them be aware that you're interested in certain types of roles, you want to kind of grow and develop a career path that kind of makes sense for you. And so those are the three components, and executing into those three components is ultimately on kind of your responsibility. So if there isn't a role at the company that you're ultimately looking to go to, then it's your responsibility to either advocate for the creation of a role at the company or find another company that has the role and the career opportunity that you're looking for. On the second point, being someone who's able to actually perform in the current role that you have, that's up to you. That's your destiny, right? I've always taken a very first person in the office, last person out of the office kind of mentality to every sort of job and role that I've ever taken in my life. So, and this is something that's always driven me since I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, I hoop, I love basketball. But I used to stay until like I used to stay, even in middle school, like on campus until like 8 p.m. every day, um, shooting like free throws, right? Just because like I was so obsessed with the craft and getting better, and it was just something that like really drove me. I think in sales, a big a big aspect of success is just, are you able to put in the hours and the effort and develop consistent repeatable habits that make you successful. And I would say the reality is 80% of people talk the talk, but they don't actually walk the walk. So everyone will say, yeah, I want certain things. I consider myself the best. Like 80% of people think they're better than average. But if you think about it, mathematically, that makes no sense, because if 80% of people are better than average, then the math doesn't work out, because if you're better than average, you're in the top 50%. So the reality is a lot of people will think they are top performers, or they think they're good at their jobs and things like that. But in actuality, like, not everyone understands just how much work is required to become a top performer. And some people have it, some people don't. Some people can develop that skill set. There can be like a lot of triggers in life. Maybe like, the loss of a family member motivated someone to like really kind of rethink their life and get on the right track. Or, someone who grew up in poverty, had to kind of figure out how to survive and figure things out. And so that kind of motivates them, or they have to provide for their family. Some people, they're not really focused or prioritizing career habits and success in the beginning, and then they grow up and they mature and they realize, okay, this is something I want to really kind of like focus on. Um, so that second component is just, very innate. Like, are you able to really kind of become the best version of yourself and commit to that? And then the third part, I would say, which is mostly, more around sort of like networking and finding the right stakeholders, is like, are you also investing time, not just in yourself and your own performance, but also, you know, investing time in building relationships with your bosses or the people that would have an input in your promotion decision, so that you're likable or you're respected, and um, your stakeholders can make a case for why you should be promoted.
That's a great answer. And going back to something you said earlier, I like how you were saying that you don't need to be an engineer to do tech sales. So after I told you all the jobs that I worked, then I actually was able to get like a internship type of role where I was lead IT support, where basically it was just like a 1099 role where I was doing like, I'm climbing up fixing network adapters, and I'm, little small technical issues and people don't know how to hook up this, and so I'm like the IT man running around the school. But before I did that, I studied IT. I got my bachelor's in IT, and that's when I really learned, like, okay, I'm like coding, networking. I want to get into cybersecurity because I think that's where the money is, but I don't really like that. I don't really. What I like is people building relationship. That's what really made me see how much I love people too. Is just being on the screen, just studying all day, just and you need that type of work ethic to do that type of stuff, especially if you don't enjoy it. Like you said, to be the first one in, last one out. So when I was really doing that, I learned that I like building relationships. So that's how I found out about tech sales. But I also, like you said, learned that work ethic that I can take with me to where, okay, I'm shoveling cabbage all day in a frozen warehouse for a place called Fresh Express. So I can do that all day. Why can't I make calls? Why can't I go hard at and doing other aspects? And then also when I was doing the IT, I was coding In coding, everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. And for me, coding was not my strength. So just staring at the computer all day, having to be real concise and just get real detailed and technical, I wasn't really trying to do that. But as hard as I had to work to try to do that, I used that same effort and was able to transfer it to tech sales. So I love that you said that. Now, talking about that passion and that work ethic, a lot of my mentees, they come to me. One thing I ask everybody, I'm saying, okay, you want to get into tech sales on a scale of 1 through 10, how bad do you want to get in? You would assume everybody would say a 10, but you get a lot of 8, 6s. And a lot of the time, the reason is because they're unsure of the blueprint, the path they need to actually take to get that goal, or they're unsure in their self to be able to perform. Now, I think being able to perform is you get that from the work ethic of coming in early, leaving late. So somebody asked me the other day, they were like, "Oh, were you always a hunter mentality?" Because I told them it was a hunter road. I'm like, "Were you always a hunter mentality?" I'm like, and I actually told them a story of someone I seen on, I think it was YouTube. They caught a big fish, and they're like, "Oh, as humans, we need to be eating in the morning. You need to do something productive to stimulate hunting." So I'm teaching them like you need to have a hunter's mentality because you like to eat, don't you? Need to eat to survive. So hunting is not something that I'm just like, oh, I'm just so happy go lucky and just so motivated. It's more of a discipline of okay, I want to eat, so I gotta have a positive attitude, I gotta have a good mindset and stay consistent in my efforts of being motivated. So let's say somebody that they feel like they don't really have that passion, because this is what I told them. I said, you want to have the wisdom to be able to see what you don't want or where you don't want to be. You don't want to have to feel that struggle yourself. So, like you said, some people might have a family member pass away, they might hit rock bottom, don't got a dollar to their name, then the passion comes. So, what's your best advice that you could get? And another thing that I do is called the why exercise, the root cause analysis, where you go 7 layers deep into the why. So, that would be my advice as far as people that need to find out where their passion derives from and what really motivates them. So what would be your best advice for people who's like, oh man, have you always been a hunter? And they kind of one foot in, 1 foot out, just testing the water, and they're kind of scared. They just need some motivation, they feel like.
Sorry, just so I understand your question. Your question is like, what would be the advice I give for people who need more motivation?
Yes, or feel like because some people they feel like having the passion is like a gift that some people got. And you kind of said the same thing, like some people got in them, some people don't. I feel like you cannot have that passion or be an introverted person or not. I like to call it having that dog in you, having some get up and get it in you, whatever you want to call it. They feel like they don't have that. What would be your best advice for people to that feel like they don't have the passion?
Hmm, that's a good question, actually. Um,
Appreciate it. And I know I'm catching you off guard with that one. I thought about it when you said it. I'm like, this just came up yesterday, so I gotta ask it.
I think people go into sales for a lot of reasons, but at the end of the day, no one goes into sales if they aren't motivated by money. And I know that sounds a little bit, maybe that's like weird to say, but you're in sales,
It's
so you
real.
should be money. Um,
Right.
Obviously, a lot of the aspects around sales, like, being able to talk to people, build relationships, all those things are great, but like you can do that as a pastor if you want, right? You can go, be a pastor, do something in religion and be a community member. Um, and you can be around people and do great things. You can work for nonprofits. Um, but the reason why people go into sales is because they want financial freedom and they want to be in a role where they feel like the amount of input that they put in translates to the outputs and the outcomes they get, right? So there are certain types of jobs where, like, let's say you're like an inbound customer success call center agent, right? Like there's only so much you can do since you're just relying on inbound phone calls and you don't have much agency and control over like how much money you could theoretically be making. But with sales, oftentimes you're doing a lot of outbounding and going and finding new business and winning deals. And a lot of that is going to be your sort of skill set. Um, and so it's one of those roles where, unlike a lot of other different roles, you have the agency and the power, and you're in control of your own destiny in terms of how much earning and income you're able to make. Not every role is like that. If you're I guess if you're theoretically like delivering pizzas, you can spend more time like delivering pizzas and make more money that way. Um, but sales is one of those like kind of jobs where how much effort you put in translates to how much potential earnings you get back. And so um, that should be, to me at least, a pretty motivating factor for people. Like the idea that you can be in control of your financial freedom and your earnings if you put in the effort and you take the right sort of mentality and you take sort of a learning mindset. Now, as to your question of people who understand that sales is a path to financial freedom, but need a little bit more motivation, um, I think that's a very sort of like personal sort of like, framework that it's hard for me to be like, yeah, what motivates me is probably going to motivate you, right? Like I'm single, I don't have a family. And so needing to provide for my children and making sure that there's food on the table is not something that motivates me, right? But maybe for a single mother, like that might be a motivating factor. Maybe for someone who is like, yeah, I'm single, I don't have like children, but I want a nice house and I want to be retired at the age of 40. That could be a very powerful sort of motivating factor um for people. So I guess the best advice I would say in terms of like how to motivate people, um or how someone can be motivated, is to just kind of like really kind of like size up your own personal life, do some meditation and reflection, and think about where you want to be in 10 years and 20 years with your life. And if any of those things that you want to be in 10 to 20 years have anything to do with financial freedom and you know uh, a nest egg and a bank account that has money that you can kind of like rely on in the future, then then you kind of want to work backwards from there and be like, how much money do I want to have in my bank account? What kind of career do I want to have? Um, and work backwards. And you're like, well, I have to start now and kind of like build my way up towards that. And so being able to kind of think about your personal life from like a 5 to 10 year horizon, or even a 20-year horizon, allows you to kind of like start seeing the bigger picture. And then suddenly all these small things like, oh, I don't want to pick up the phone, all these things start becoming like very sort of like, when your eyes are set on a milestone or a goal that's 5 or 10 years or 20 years out, suddenly all these like small things like picking up the phone or getting started and things like that just kind of start becoming like really easy suddenly, magically, because you're like, well, I'm thinking like 5 to 10 years ahead. So how can this thing be like hard for me if I'm thinking 5 years ahead? If you don't really have a plan or a long-term like vision, then small things start becoming like big things. Like, oh, I don't know, like I don't want to pick up this phone because like I'm nervous. But if you're like, well, I have a goal for myself and it's like 5 to 10 years out, then every small thing that you do day to day just becomes like a part of contributing towards that longer term goal. And as long as you have a long term sort of horizon for that, then these things start becoming easier. So that those would be kind of the kind of piece of advice I would give. And the final thing I would say is, I'm not actually sure, like, this is still like kind of a learning journey, and it's been a very interesting, almost like philosophical question, is like, are some people naturally sheep, and are some people naturally wolves, or can sheep become wolves, and can wolves become sheep, right? Like in sales, you kind of, obviously, like, you want to be a good person, and you want to develop genuine relationships with buyers and network and things like that. But the best salespeople I've found, I'm not saying advocating for being like an asshole or anything, but like the best salespeople, they have this like sort of like inner sort of like edge. You were talking about that dog in them. Like, You know, that sort of thing that drives professional athletes the same way to become Olympians, you know, um, guys in the league, you know, they all have that sort of like thing that kind of makes them tick. Um, and it kind of translates into like what they do day to day. And you know, I'm not sure. Like maybe some people are better off not being in sales because you know they're not the type of person where they're actually looking for you know crazy amounts of financial success, or you know for them they'd much rather live a happy, chill life, um, you know, and enjoy life rather than kind of sacrificing a lot of things in the early days to build sort of delayed gratification, right? Some people prefer easy things now and you know they have a good thing going on and you know they have other priorities. Maybe they like writing, maybe they like movies, they have hobbies to pursue, and so for them like a job is just a job. Whereas other people are like, hey, like my interest and my passion is my career and really developing it and becoming the best version of myself that I can become. It's the same way some people like go to the gym and work out a lot and they're doing it because they want to be the best physical versions of themselves. And some people don't go to the gym because they're like, no, like I'll get a couple hours in, you know, maybe I'll jog once a week, but like that's not my like I'm not going to be like psychopathically working out because I have other priorities and things like that. And so, you know, it's also an interesting philosophical question. Like, are certain people better cut out for sales than not? You know, and so for me, like kind of animals come to mind, like sheeps versus wolves and that kind of thing.
That's a great answer. And it was a lot of things that you said that I laughed at. So one thing that you said was when people would be like, "Oh, I don't want to pick up the phone." The reason that was funny is because I hear that so much, and this is the reason how you were kind of like, I don't know, it's a philosophical thing, and you don't know really knows the answer. I personally do agree that some people got different strengths and weaknesses, so different niches, and some people are going to be more comfortable doing certain things. For example, in my past role, I'm working as a VDR at a startup that sold quoting and estimating software. So being a VDR for this company, absolutely no product market fit, no structure, no sales, no VP of sales, no sales. Like you, they fired the business development. You're literally a complete hunter, everything sales source prospect, and no scripts, no nothing. You just get it out the bud. So I was working that, and one of the software engineers, she's telling me, she's like, "Oh, I don't know how you guys cold call. Like, that is so hard. Like, I would rather like just ball up and never come out before I would just make a call." I was like, "No, it's not that serious." Like, I just so the way I like to think of it, what motivated me personally is coding. Well, I always was like, when I played football, my coach would be like, "Oh, Zuri and Tim Varga are the only ones that know how to work hard, are the only ones that know how to fight." That's what they used to say, only ones that know how to fight. So, like you said, some people got it in them, some people don't. I do agree with that. Because if they say two people out of a whole football team got that dog in them know how to fight, that means the rest of the people don't naturally. But I do feel like some people can learn it, and I feel like it's a mindset thing. So for me, what motivated me was now, I do agree that some people shouldn't be in sales, and I feel like if you go 7 layers deep, say, why do you want to get into sales? Oh, I want to be an AE. Why you want to be an AE? Because I want to do this. Oh, okay. Well, why you want the money? It's gonna get to the money eventually. Then once you get 7 layers deep, some people are talking about God. Some people, like you said, is family. Some people want to be able to look themselves in the mirror. It's all different things that's gonna motivate people. But I do feel like once you do, so if you go 7 layers deep, I've had people, most people there be like, it's an obvious 10 once you go 7 layers deep. I literally had somebody that goes 7 layers deep and they're like, I'm gonna be able to help my sisters and my family and make sure they don't got to go through what I go through. I'm like, okay, so how bad you want to do that 1 through 10? Thinking for sure to be 10. And he was like, 8. I'm like, I'm like, but you don't care about nothing. You need to care. So if you like that, if you go 7 layers deep and you just don't care, you still like, oh, so how much you want to just not have a miserable life and be able to look yourself in the mirror? 6. That's when I would say, okay, just don't get into sales. But I feel like you said, that was great advice as far as just finding that passion.